Welcome to this explainer. We're diving straight into a measured, documentary look at the actual mechanics behind the current conflict in the Middle East. Right now, Israel is sitting at the very center of this massive, incredibly complex web of state and non-state actors. You have Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah up north in Lebanon, Houthi militants extending all the way out to Yemen, and of course the direct involvement of Iran. It's a truly unprecedented, multi-front escalation. So, the crucial question we're investigating today is this: how exactly did a localized attack ignite a full-blown regional war? Our goal here is to trace the exact chronological mechanics of this escalating conflict. We're going to look strictly at the strategies, the specific technologies, and the direct series of events that took a single border breach and transformed it into a war involving ballistic missiles, hypersonic weapons, and covert assassinations across multiple international borders.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1. The October 7th spark. The initial attack.
To really grasp the scale of what happened on October 7, 2023, we have to break down the meticulous, four-part execution of the initial Hamas attack on Israeli communities. First, at exactly 6:30 in the morning, a massive rocket barrage provided cover for fighters using powered hang gliders and motorized paragliders to essentially bypass air defenses. Once they hit the ground, they secured the terrain so an elite commando unit could breach the electronic and cement border wall. Then, Part 2 hit at 7:30 a.m. This was a coordinated ground entry using explosives right at the Kerem Shalom and Erez border crossings. Bulldozers actually widened the gaps, allowing four-wheel drives and motorbikes to just flood in. For Part 3, a commando unit attacked the IDF Southern Gaza headquarters and actively jammed their communications to stop personnel from calling for backup. And finally, Part 4 involved moving hostages back into Gaza, which was intended for prisoner exchanges.
3,000. Just think about that number for a second. That is the staggering volume of rockets launched from Gaza at 6:30 a.m. in just that initial phase. This onslaught featured a really wide array of munitions, including distinctive homemade Qassam rockets and highly potent Iranian-made Fajar rockets. Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system immediately sprang into action, successfully countering almost 60% of these incoming threats. But the sheer volume was literally designed to overwhelm the system while the ground and air infiltrations were happening.
Following those October 7th attacks, the Israel Defense Forces initiated a massive response. If we take a look at Gaza and divide it into 5 main sectors: North Gaza, Gaza City, Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis, and Rafah, we can clearly map out the IDF's land, sea, and air invasion strategy. They initially invaded from the north, pushed centrally, and instructed Gazan civilians to move south. Taking control of the border crossings, especially Kerem Shalom and the Hamas-controlled Rafah crossing, became a totally critical strategic objective to halt the rocket fire. As the invasion eventually pushed to the southernmost points, civilian evacuation instructions shifted again, with Gazans later being told to move back toward designated humanitarian zones in the north.
Moving on to Part 2. Broadening the battlefield. New regional actors.
The conflict definitely didn't stay contained to Israel and Gaza for long. Enter the Houthi militants in Yemen, who started attacking global shipping vessels in strategic waterways to show support for Palestinians. Let's take a quick technical detour here, because when a massive cargo ship gets within 80 kilometers, or about 40 miles, of the Yemeni coast, it enters the crosshairs of some very specific hardware. The Houthis frequently use a re-engineered Soviet-era weapon called the P-21 anti-ship missile. This thing uses a solid booster that fires for just 2 to 3 seconds before a liquid fuel second stage kicks in. It actually hunts its target using analog radar, and when it hits, a hollow-shaped charge warhead detonates. It's easily capable of destroying or completely sinking a massive cargo ship.
The escalation in the Red Sea really hit a boiling point on the morning of December 26th. Over a grueling 10-hour period, Houthi forces launched a highly complex barrage specifically targeting U.S. destroyers. They fired 3 anti-ship ballistic missiles, which were actually converted SA-2 missiles capable of flying at Mach 3.5 alongside 2 land attack cruise missiles. The goal here wasn't just physical destruction, it was the psychological disruption of global trade routes. Fortunately, the U.S. destroyer's defense system successfully kicked in and intercepted the incoming threats. 0 damage to the ships and 0 injuries reported.
This brings us to Part 3, Israel and Iran clash. Direct military conflict.
We crossed a truly historic and unprecedented threshold here, the end of a decades-long proxy war. That all changed after an Israeli strike on the Iranian embassy in Damascus eliminated several Iranian generals. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer math behind Iran's unprecedented retaliation. They didn't just push a button and fire everything at once. It was a highly synchronized mathematical operation. First, they launched around 170 drones, which travel at a relatively slow 114 miles per hour and take hours to reach Israel. An hour later, they fired over 30 cruise missiles, traveling at 500 miles per hour. Finally, they launched over 120 ballistic missiles moving at a blistering 3,836 miles per hour, taking just 10 to 15 minutes to arrive. By launching them at these perfectly calculated intervals, Iran ensured that the drones, the cruise missiles, and the ballistic missiles would all breach Israeli airspace and strike at almost the exact same time, trying to completely overwhelm air defenses.
Part 4. Covert Tactics. The Shadow War escalates.
While the skies were filled with missiles, another war was escalating on the ground, a shadow war defined by covert tactics and high-profile assassinations starting in the summer of 2024. You can clearly see the tit-for-tat nature of this conflict when you compare the hardware used between Hezbollah and Israel. On July 27th, an unguided Hezbollah Falak rocket, which has a 53-kilogram warhead and a short 10-kilometer range, tragically struck a football field in Majd el-Shams, causing a deadly 100-foot blast radius. In direct retaliation on July 30th, Israel struck southern Beirut to target a senior Hezbollah commander. But they used a precision weapon, likely a spice bomb. Unlike the unguided Falak, the spice bomb uses military-grade GPS guidance, tail section fins for gravity-guided freefall, and it can penetrate 3 meters of solid concrete before detonating an 80-kilogram warhead with pinpoint precision.
That precision strike in Beirut triggered a massive chain reaction of high-profile assassinations. The most shocking of these was the elimination of Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas. He was killed in Tehran inside a highly secure guest house protected by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. But get this, according to intelligence officials, this wasn't an airstrike. An explosive device had actually been covertly smuggled and planted inside 3 different rooms of that very guest house up to 2 months prior. When the time was right, operatives hiding in a nearby mountainous area remotely activated the explosive, destroying the room and eliminating Haniyeh.
But honestly, the most sophisticated covert op of this entire conflict involved everyday consumer electronics. Realizing Israel had hacked their cellular comms, Hezbollah commanders switched to older tech like pagers and walkie-talkies. In response, a shell company in Hungary called BAC Consulting, which was allegedly a front for Israel's Mossad, bought licensing rights from a Taiwanese company called Gold Apollo. Somewhere along the global supply chain, explosives were covertly planted inside these devices. When that compromised tech was finally shipped to Hezbollah and Lebanon, the simultaneous detonation of those devices across the country absolutely crippled Hezbollah's communication infrastructure.
Part 5. A region on the brink. Massive strategic strikes. By late September 2024, the covert shadow war exploded right back into the open. Following those devastating pager explosions, Hezbollah retaliated with an intense barrage, launching over 100 rockets into northern Israel. But these weren't just standard unguided munitions. For the very first time, Hezbollah used Fadi-1 and Fadi-2 guided missiles alongside traditional Katyushas. What makes these Fadi missiles incredibly dangerous is their unjammable inertial Biden systems. By replacing old midsections with brand new navigation tech, similar to what's used in Iranian Shahed drones, these missiles can't be easily jammed by radio waves. They successfully targeted huge strategic and technological hubs like the Rama David base and Rafael Advanced Defense Systems.
Israel's response to this escalation was the systematic decapitation of Hezbollah's leadership. On September 20th, Commander Ibrahim Akil was assassinated by a bunker-buster bomb during a ground-floor meeting. Exactly a week later, on September 27th, the IDF set their sights on Hezbollah's elusive founder, Hassan Nasrallah, who had literally been in hiding for years. On the afternoon of the 27th, Israeli officials received a massive tip-off, reportedly from an undercover Iranian agent, that Nasrallah was arriving at Hezbollah's underground headquarters in his suburb of Beirut. Shortly after, a laser-targeted F-15 strike was initiated.
80. That is the number of individual bombs required to penetrate the Hezbollah's headquarters. This facility was located in a sprawling underground basement beneath a 6-story multi-building complex containing a vast network of escape tunnels. To ensure the target was neutralized, a dozen F-15 fighter jets dropped 80 individual bombs of various types. The real tip of the spear here involved massive bunker-buster munitions designed to penetrate deep underground, completely leveling all 6 structures and successfully eliminating Hassan Nasrallah.
The assassination of Nasrallah triggered an immediate, massive retaliation from Iran. To avenge his death, Iran launched approximately 180 hypersonic and ballistic missiles directly at Israel. These weapons traveled over 1,000 miles to strike heavily fortified targets, including the Nevatim and Tel Nof air bases, which, by the way, house Israel's billion-dollar F-35 fighter jets. The strikes also targeted the Hatzrim air base in the Negev desert and the Mossad headquarters located right in densely populated Tel Aviv.
And that brings us to a really sobering final thought. We've traced the mechanics from a morning border breach to a multinational theater of war. We've seen everyday supply chains infiltrated with high explosives, ungemmable guided missiles deployed, and literally hundreds of hypersonic and ballistic missiles raining down on capital cities and billion-dollar airbases. The rules of engagement have been completely rewritten. So the question we are left with today is this: with every red line seemingly erased, what threshold remains uncrossed in this regional war? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and as always, keep questioning what you see in the headlines.